Today's guest is Lukas Hermann, a German scholar, musician, and teacher whose music reflects his deep love for literature. His compositions for modular synthesizer oscillate between lyrical forms and abstract sound sculptures, and he releases his music on Hauch Records, Petite Victory Collective, and on the label of the Eurorack Ruhr, a musical collective he co-founded. He regularly organizes events and workshops in the Ruhr area and teaches synthesizers, Eurorack, and Ableton Live. My name is Giovanni Grandi, and this is Let's Talk Music with Frap Tools. Thank you very much, Lukas, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
I would like to start this conversation, as I usually do, by asking what is your musical journey and when you started playing music and how you ended up playing the modular synthesizer and why.
I started playing music when I was like 7-8 years old. I started playing guitar. 2 guitars are still behind me on the wall, and I'm still playing today. I started out with classical guitar training, which was fun at the beginning, not so fun later on because I got quite bored with playing all the same classical pieces all the time. So I started rebelling against it and playing bass in a jazz combo, and with other friends also rock music, rock guitar, which I taught myself autodidactically by myself, based on the knowledge I had. That was quite fun because I got far very easily. Then I played guitar for a few years with friends, singer-songwriter combos and other situations. Then I started studying. I studied literature, thought about studying music as well. However, literature got me more at the university, so I stayed with that. But music was always a part of my life, obviously. And then 4 or 5 years ago, after having played a few synthesizers, maybe 5 or 6 different ones, I thought, I want to do electronic music. And I want to do electronic music more or less professionally, as an artist, as an educator maybe as well. And that was the point when I decided on focusing on modular synthesizers.
So you first had an acquaintance with keyboard synths, and then you transitioned to the modular when you found that this probably was going to be the part of your life, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not an uncommon way at all. I know that now, being an educator and having seen a lot of people transition into modular synthesis or into synthesis in general. But I think that my transition was very decidedly done. Like I thought of, I want to do electronic music professionally. I want to pursue this as a career in a way, in any way possible. And that was the point when I decided on modular synthesizers. It like correlated because I wanted to have an instrument that would keep me interested in pushing forward, pushing myself forward, pushing like my understanding of music forward as well. And the modular synthesizer seemed to be the right one for that, for my artistic expression, for my artistic endeavors.
So you are not finding this kind of stimulus with other kinds of instruments and other kinds of synthesizers?
Not so consistently as with modular synthesizers.
I see.
That is my main gripe with them. Like I love it to play other synthesizers, but I am not continuously drawn to them like I am to modular synths.
I see. Probably also because the modular synthesizer is not like a fixed instrument, and in most of the times it changes with the musician. So you can swap modules, you can change the configuration every time. But even if you keep the same configuration by just changing the way you patch or moving a module in a different part of the case, kind of forces you to learn a bit, like take a step back and start learning again.
Yeah, definitely. But also on the other hand, I am now playing 3 different cases, 3 different fixed instruments, more or less, which I am not changing up that often.
Yeah, that would have been my next question, because I was about to ask if you are one of those musicians who tend to constantly revise their setup, or if you have reached a sort of balance in your instrument design.
Yeah, the latter one would be my answer, because I am playing now very improvised all the time in the studio and on stage. I'm not having patches done for the performance, but the instrument stays the same. So like I'm constantly playing on the same instrument, but I'm constantly developing new techniques on making that same instrument a different instrument, so to speak. By practicing, by doing, not by like changing up modules or developing a patch and then tweaking it, but like the process of interacting with the instrument is part of my composition as improvisation.
That's a sort of recurring topic, of course. But for example, in the interview with Trevor Treglia, he brought up the concept of a patch, like a modular synthesizer patch, as an instrument definition. Because whenever you patch your synthesizer, you're programming it and you're giving it a shape of a specific instrument that may not be the same for another kind of patch. And in the episode with Baseput, which as we are filming is yet to be released, he, on the other hand, he has a more conservative approach to its patching, and he used those tendrils cables, and his case is more or less always pre-patched. But at the same time, he moved on the same observation as you did, meaning that even if the instrument is the same, and even if the patch is the same, by just practice and the way, and by just changing and exploring the way you play with the instrument and with the patch, you can obtain different instruments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is also true for my practice on stage and in the studio. Obviously, I design patches that are flexible enough to morph into something different while I am playing, which is also another aspect of modular synthesis, which I'm really intrigued by, that you are able to really form the material, the sound material you are currently working with, into something completely different with very malleable techniques, so to speak. Like you can vary your technique to form different sounds, as well as vary the sound to get new technical ideas. So it's like codependent.
And you mentioned that you briefly hinted at your music career, your musical life, and your music job. And would you like to shed some light on that, if you want?
Yeah, sure. I am working professionally in the field of modular synthesis for almost 4 years now. I started out a bit earlier, but during the years of the pandemic, a bit before, a bit after that, I am really starting to get a real sense of what I want to do and what I am doing right now, which is quite manifold, actually. I am obviously playing and performing with modular synthesizers in various contexts. I play live shows, I play improvised shows with friends, I participate in sessions and in other contexts. I also co-founded a music collective here in Western Germany where I live, which is called Eurorack Ruhr. Ruhr is the river here in the area, which is denoting the location, but we are active in the whole of Western Germany, and we are also trying to connect with other collectives in Germany. So I'm also doing networking, not just for myself, but for others as well. So like bringing people together, bringing ideas together, realizing concerts, workshops, etc. And the other one, the other part of my work is also education, as I said, I am having a lot of private pupils, which I'm teaching modular synthesis via Zoom or here in my studio. And I'm also working with a local school for all people, that is open to all people, also for adults, for which I'm offering a course on modular synthesis and synthesis in general, which is very low-key and does not cost much. So I try to make this topic and synthesis more affordable and approachable for anybody.
That's remarkable. I think that it highlights a very healthy approach towards an instrument like the modular synthesizer, which in most of the cases is seen, at least I've got this impression, but is seen as a sort of luxury item, you know, by many people. They are like a collector's item, and often by people who cannot afford the modular synthesizer, it shines as a sort of like a luxury item. But then again, I think that it is basically like any other kind of musician. If you are a classical musician, like the modular synthesizer is probably cheap for an instrument, but at the same time, the world of classical music is also capable of involving lots of people and not creating like barriers of based on wealth and on. I mean, you see a violin, and of course you see that it is a very like a very precious work of art and craftsmanship. But first of all, it is an instrument and something that has to make music, which is something more universal and that can connect people.
Yeah, definitely. And everybody has a different approach to these kinds of things, and you need to just show these instruments off in a way that they are accessible. You cannot show these instruments off as a luxury item or as something to be worshipped in a way, but you need to invite people just to try it out. And I see it also as a more or less like a job of mine to do that, because I have the privilege of not just owning one synthesizer but multiple ones, because I work in the industry, because I work in the field. You need to not build these barriers, but you need to break them down. And I'm doing this both with adults and with children, actually. There's also a kind of cultural project here in Gelsenkirchen, where I'm based in Western Germany, in cooperation with the city, which I'm part of, where we are going into different schools and different youth meetup places throughout the city, where we are bringing instruments and other art supplies for painting or for dancing or other arts. And when I present these synthesizers to the kids, they just start tweaking the knobs. They are not just not intimidated by the instrument, but they are so curious to try it out that all this stuff, price, like knowledge about how to work with this, it all fades away. And that's so great to see. And I need to leverage these opportunities also for myself, because I also gain a healthy perspective on these instruments. Like these kids, they just try stuff out, and all this curiosity I need to also incorporate into my own work all the time, which is very, very nice to have in my life, these kinds of workshops.
Yeah, and speaking about community, you also briefly mentioned the activity of connection that you are doing on a regular basis with your collective, the Eurorack Ruhr. I was curious to hear more about that, especially the different collectives in Germany or in Europe that you made contact with.
Yeah, so Eurorack Ruhr is now above 2 years old now. We founded the collective in 2021 officially. We are also a real enterprise. Now we are having several festivals we are organizing and session evenings we are organizing regularly for other people, also with public funding sometimes to make them even bigger and to make marketing so people know about it. But as you mentioned, the most important part of forming a collective is regular communication. So the main purpose I am seeing in Eurorack Ruhr is having regular meetups here in Western Germany where people just can come around, talk about gear, talk about music, whatever they want. So every 2 months we are having a session evening here in Gelsenkirchen. The last one was at the end of February, where we are recording right now. So from now, it was last week. And we invited another collective from Cologne, which I happen to know one person of, and they came with their instruments and with their ideas, and they presented their music during the session evening, and then people from our collective presented their music, and we got to talk about that. So this kind of connection, this kind of event is for me the most important one. And apart from that, we are also organizing workshops regularly, and we are having a 1-year big event where we invited Frap Tools last year as well, the Modus Festival in Bochum, which we hope to realize this year again, which is a DIY and modular and synthesizer festival with focus on music and music practice and community building.
Yeah, it was a nice experience. We were there, and it was nice to see also people not directly involved with the music business, and maybe sometimes not even players, but just listeners, which I think it is a demographic section that tends to be a bit neglected in the field of experimental music or like niche instruments like the modular synthesizer. So I was wondering, I would like to ask, in your regular community meetings and the activities that you do throughout the year with the Eurorack Ruhr collective, how do you approach the non-musicians? I mean, do you have this kind of audience as well sometimes?
Yes, we do, but it's a bit harder to reach these people.
Yeah.
I'm trying my best, I think. But it's not easy all the time. But I have built up a few possibilities to do that, like these courses for the public German school for adults. It's one way, because there are often people participating in these courses who are just saying, yeah, I like to listen to electronic music and I just want to know how it works a bit more, just a bit more. Not that I want to have it as a hobby even, but I just want to learn a bit more. Now, and these people are the ones that can carry the curiosity into different areas, into different communities, into different bubbles. And another way I'm trying currently to get to excite people about electronic and experimental music is another way I devised. I opened a bookshop in Gelsenkirchen also in the last few months, and I am hosting concerts there. But people from the local city communities are coming into the bookstore for buying books, or just because they're interested in what is happening locally. And then I can also maybe interest them into coming to a concert, maybe happened a few times now, and then other people are made aware of what we are doing in this community and what I'm doing with electronic music.
Yeah, I like the fact that in these last few sentences you focused just on the idea of concerts and music and not getting too technical about the instruments, because I think that as soon as you made an event specifically focused on an instrument, it will inevitably get more technical and gather people more in the circle, which is fine. I mean, there is need also for those kind of gatherings, which are more for specialists, let's say, like conferences. so to speak, or gatherings of people with the same hobby and with a advanced level of expertise in the field. And in my brief experience to such gatherings, there is very little room for extra audience if the event is tailored on a specific instrument, mostly because people who are not aware of that instrument don't know what kind of music they may expect. Sometimes music is not even advertised in such events, so I've got the same feeling that if you want to bring more people in, like a more diverse community, you have to focus on the music and on the social part of rather than just the technical aspect of the instrument.
Yeah, totally, I agree. And also the intersection to other arts, to other parts of the cultural scene. And you need to also assess the local scene which you are interacting with. Like in some cities, like in Berlin or in Cologne, if I'm focusing on Germany right now, but also in other countries, obviously, mainly the major cities, there is a vibrant electronic music scene which can not only how could I say, sustain itself by itself and does not need to expand for specific purposes, because there are always people coming to concerts, there are always people devising up new event ideas or anything else. But to bring this kind of music, to bring this kind of cultural impact the music can have into communities that do not know so much about it, that, in my opinion, is the real challenge, and that is the challenge we are expecting to attack and maybe solve in a way here in Western Germany, because many people are living in this area. The Ruhr area in which I live consists of over 5-6 million people, but there is there was, at least before we started, no real electronic music scene throughout all these cities which are here.
So it is a sort of, I think it's a bit harder, correct me if I'm wrong, or at least it requires a different kind of work in those areas where there is not like a large hub where you know to go to find the electronic music, as opposed to Berlin or maybe also Cologne, as you mentioned.
Yes. Yeah, there is for example, no nightclub at all in Gelsenkirchen. So not just no electronic music or techno or experimental music club in a way. There is no music club in the city. So the people are going to Düsseldorf, they are going to Bochum, to other cities. And just this aspect destroys the local scene, because there is no local scene, because there is no local hub, there is no local meetup place, and we want to change that. We want to have these sessions, and we want to have the bookstore. I want to have the bookstore also as a meetup for these interests, to reflect these interests and to show, there is a space for you. You can come here, you can talk about it, you can experience new things, which is also a reason why I'm also selling tapes and vinyls and books on music and experimental music, avant-garde music in my shop.
And do people come from other? Because now we've been focusing on the local aspect, but I was also curious if because I've got that feeling when I came there, first of all. But do people came to your bookstore also from the surrounding areas? Or from other parts of the region?
They are starting to, yes.
Because in the same way that since there is no nightclub, you move to Düsseldorf, maybe there is not such a bookshop in Düsseldorf and people may come there in a sort of more like horizontal, spread out community. So without a fixed center, like more of a federal republic of electronic music, let's say.
Yeah, that would be actually a very ideal state for me, because I do not only want to do something for this city, but for the area as a whole. Obviously, I want to attract people from the whole area. The project is still very young. Also, Eurorack Ruhr is although we achieved something in the last 2 years, we are still quite young, and we want to move forward for the next years to come. And the shop should also grow for during the next years. But we have some traction from different cities around, and members of the collective are also from different cities. So we have connections in Düsseldorf, we have connections in Cologne and in Münster and in other cities here in the area. I also try to invite people from other countries regularly. So we are having a concert from a French vocalist and artist from Paris in April. She's coming to Gelsenkirchen for a concert, and we are hooking her up together with a local artist for the pre-show, and then she's doing the main concert. And so we are trying to always get people into our spaces, to the area, and to make them aware of what is happening here.
I would like to briefly go back to your work with children and younger students, because you said something very interesting before, the one about the way they approach the modular synthesizer, and the fact that this sort of naive approach is useful also for you as an artist. And I would like to know if you incorporated this approach also in your music releases, and how they came to be.
Yes, in a way, I do this all the time, definitely. On the improvisational level. Like these more or less naive approaches show me show me again how many sounds a modular synthesizer really contains. Like, because I recently talked with a pupil about this as well. In my experience, learning to play modular synthesizers is as with other instruments obviously as well, but especially with modular synth, I think it comes and goes in waves. You are learning very much, and then you have this plateau, and then you dip a bit. And these dipping points, these are the points where you sit in front of the synth and you think, yes, I know how it works and I know how to patch certain things, but actually I really don't know anything. I only do the same thing over and over again, which is obviously not true, because every time you do something is different, but it feels this way. And these are the moments, in my experience, where it helps to have improvisational techniques to combat this feeling. To combat this feeling in order to stay productive in a way, to stay doing music, but also to figure out what to learn next. And these are the moments in which I'm very naively playing the synth, in which I'm just playing, experimenting, not thinking too much about what I'm doing, but obviously subconsciously doing exactly that, like realizing afterwards what has happened during my improvisation, during my experiments, and what part of this do I want to take further? Do I want to have as a basis to learn more about the synthesizer, to get into this upward wave movement again? So these are the points which I'm really using these naive approaches for.
That's very interesting, because I think that this is more or less true with every instrument and every kind of arts and crafts, because when you reach the plateau is the moment when you are actually good at what you were practicing, right? And you are kind of self-confident, and this is where you develop a sort of fear of making mistakes, because everything is going quite smoothly. And so
making
I think
mistakes again.
Yeah, exactly, because you're kind of having comfort in this behavior, and it takes a very quite a reasonable effort to put yourself in the position to make new mistakes and find out where you need to work. I think that's a very interesting way of putting it, because the kids are not, they don't fear of making mistakes. They do mistakes all the time. They just don't care. So probably that's this kind of attitude of course, there is a place for mistakes and a place for not making mistakes, for example, with a live concert. But then again, the way you react to those is the most important thing.
Exactly, because if you are improvising with modular synth or with any instruments, you have to allow yourself to make mistakes on stage as well, obviously. But you need also the ability to have this kind of forgetfulness about that, like to let the mistake just be the mistake. One could also say just let the sound be the sound, regardless of what happened.
Yeah,
that would be a bit hazardous, but maybe have a good balance between these kind of approaches. And also this kind of forgetfulness during playing is also very important. You need to be forgetful about what you did before to go to some new frontier, but you also need to remember this forgetfulness, this state of not knowing what will happen next, to assess what you really want to do. And this is very hard, and this is the basis of really approaching these instruments in an artistic way, I think, because the technical aspect is so overwhelming at first, and the technical aspect can be really present throughout your career with modular synthesizers, that you need to have these artistic experiences without technical basis in order to reassess your knowledge of the technical aspect.
Yeah. And since we are getting a bit specific right now, I think it's the right moment to edit your patch in and listen to that and to your patch background, so we can have a glimpse of the sound of Lukas Hermann.
This is a patch I'm currently working at. It's made with a lot of Frap Tools modules, but also with some different modules from other manufacturers. I would like to start to give a short overview and then describe why and how I am working with this patch the way I am. So this is a Nono Lander case. It has 3 rows of 104 HP each. It has a lot of power, which is good because I'm using a lot of analog modules. In the bottom row, I have 2 sequencers, the Uster and the Muxslicer. And next to that, I have the foundation oscillator and the LXD as a sort of mini Buchla-esque, Buchla Music Easel-esque voice. I like to have this kind of option because sometimes I do not want to have that many modules to work with on an idea or just jamming around. I like to have this mini system here at the bottom, which I'm also currently using, but more on that later. The Uster as a main melodic sequencer for larger compositions can also be used for minimalistic modulations, but mainly I'm using the Muxslicer for that. So the Muxslicer is more or less always patched into the Uster to modulate parameters on that sequence. We are hearing that the sequences running already are quite complex and are quite multi-layered, and that is part because the Uster is being modulated by the Sapel in this case. In the upper 2 rows, I have my voices, obviously. The Brenzo and the harmonic oscillator are both in use currently. I also am using the foundation oscillator here at the bottom, and of course a lot of modulation, more on that later. The Brenzo is going into the LXD for one voice. The harmonic oscillator here is going through the Fumana for this kind of abstract percussion sounds, also mixed together in the LXD by these 2 channels. And everything comes together into the QSC mixing system, which I'm using currently with the QSC and the group module. The group module is used for 2 sound effects, the Sarajevo as a delay and the FX8 as a reverb. For modulation, apart from the mentioned Sapel, I'm using the Falistri and the Just Friends for a lot of LFO modulation. I'm also using the Bliss IO as a hands-on controller. In this case, it's modulating the speed of a few modulations. And I also have a filter, the sisters, and the photo phaser for additional effects processing. This is currently patched into the feedback path of the Sarajevo. So what is this patch? This patch is reflecting something I really like about modular, the ability to combine quite, let's say, conventional melodic sequencing with very abstract sounds in a way that you can morph the whole composition, the whole situation into both directions. What do I mean by that? There are many different options in this case. I can, first of all, combine different voices in different ways with the mixing system. So I can, for example, mute certain stuff to listen to specific sounds a bit more directly. In this case, the Brenzo is being ring modulated and timbre modulated within itself. And the modulation can both be brought into this very atonal direction, but also in this singing melodic situation. The clock from the Usta is external. It's the Sapel that's clocking the Usta, so I can easily change the speed of both the melodic tempo and of the modulation itself. On the second channel of the Usta we have the sisters for a bit of abstract filter pinging sounds. But as you can hear, I can turn the sisters quite quickly into this quite annoying but also very interesting sound. Same goes for the photo phaser, which has a very aggressive feedback. By means of effects processing, I can turn this whole patch into a very aggressive noise drone quite quickly. At the same time, knowing what I did, of course, I can as easily dial it back again. But of course, as I also turned a bit of the pitch information into different directions, the situation is almost as new at the same time. I also like, in this case, that the two oscillators, the Brenzo and the harmonic oscillator, are not tuned to each other. So I need to discover new sounds, so to speak. I need to rely on my ear and my intuition to morph from one sound to the next, which is very daring sometimes on stage, but also very rewarding when it works out. Okay, so I would finish this off by performing a bit on this patch, maybe patch around some stuff, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and would like to thank also in this situation Giovanni for having me on the podcast and for the really, really nice chat. Thanks.
Lucas, the first impression I got by listening to your patch is that there are actually two impressions. Like the first one is this combination of abstract tones that don't quite sound familiar. They're a bit alien to the ear, but at the same time they are put in a very consistent context that doesn't make them too far from the listener. And the second impression is that there are quite a lot of voices, and all the voices tend to dramatically change. So there is this sort of complexity of voices that goes in two axes, like vertical, like different voices playing together, but also horizontal, like the same voice being dramatically different in various points of the patch. And I would like to discuss those two topics, if you want, in the order that you prefer.
Yeah, let's maybe start with the sheer amount of voices. You're absolutely right. I am using 4 oscillators, so to speak, plus resonant filters, plus modulation sources that can also be audio sources, like the Felicity and the Just Friends, which are obviously quite similar as they are both function generators. And this multitude of sound possibilities is something I like to play with during patching and during performing. Like bringing voices not only in and out on the amplitude scale, but also on the frequency scale, so to speak. Like bringing frequency modulation of one oscillator of the other in, or bringing a filter in that can distort, that can also make just resonant pings or just a bit of texture. Bringing oscillators in because I am modulating them from the low frequency range into the audio range and back. Having hands-on control of that as well during performance with this touch strip or with clock modules that can be modulated or they're like changed immediately, like the Sapel. All these kinds of elements are interesting to me because I am not interested in having a maximalist approach and pushing these voices out all the time to the listener for like a chaotic experience or a chaotic sound wall, so to speak, but having this combination of amplitude dynamics and complexity dynamics in a way, like bringing complexity in and out, not just on the melodic level, but also on the physical level of just the sheer amount of sound and the presence of sounds.
Mm-hmm. Like a matter of texture.
Yes. Because I then can focus on different elements while I'm performing, right? I can focus on the quality of the whole texture, but I can also focus on the quality of a specific sound because I can recognize the sound while it's playing, because I'm not only having many oscillators to build up a great fat drone sound, which is then always there, but I can still discern different elements and work on different elements, while at the same time having overall control over all of them.
I think that this also addresses the first topic, the idea of sounds being quite abstract, but at the same time quite close, because this approach and this process of focusing on the voices is probably it gets to the listener. It's probably this idea that makes them not too far from the listener point of view, because there is a sort of attention to the detail and to emphasizing certain voices in one point and in another. I think that this is it. Thank you.
Yeah, to add on a bit, maybe because this has also to do with the time domain of the music, so to speak, because you can recognize single events or single structure elements as a whole without thinking about their development, but at the same time recognizing other ones in their development. And also listen about how that shifts. Like maybe something gets static in a way while I am able to letting other elements evolve through time, or the other way around. And concerning the texture element, this also creates a kind of dynamic morphology of texture, right? You don't have one single texture that is still there while you're playing something on top of this, but the textural elements change their position both for the time development of the music and the overall static momentary experience of sound. Yeah.
I think that this summarizes two different approaches that we addressed in the previous episodes of this podcast. The first one with Francesco Gennari and the second one with Trevor Treglia, because Francesco made a very counterpointistic kind of music, very melodic, and where every voice has a specific motion, and where everything like timbre, amplitude, texture is like follows a very organic development in time. And whereas Trevor was more interested in not in where the music goes, but where the music is. He used these terms. So with drones and static intervals with very slow modulation that forces you to be in the moment, and somehow these two aspects, I think, that are both equally present in your definition and on the time domain, I think. Yeah,
I'm also trying to really explore this kind of instability of sound, which is able to evolve by itself or not, or able to evolve when I say so or not. So like this interplay between the modules and the sounds within the system and the interplay with me and the system. I want to first of all experience this discrepancy by myself while playing. I want to experience, okay, the system is doing something by itself, not in a generative way, but in a structural way, in an systematically evolving way. But also when I interact with the system, I can hold that, I can push that forward, I can decide in a way on how it works and how it will sound, but not completely. But the system won't change without me as well. So like this differentiation is very interesting to me, and I think for the listener, this also produces a kind of uncertain familiarity with
exactly.
the sound.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
You see and you hear different elements. You see a kind of specific performance, but you don't hear some specific aim of the performance while it is still moving forward, while it is still progressing in a way.
I think that what brings the unexpected sounds to a more familiar territory is exactly the human interaction of the performer, probably, because that resonates with everybody. Even if you don't see it, it doesn't sound like a completely randomly generated music, because even if you don't know what purpose is, you know that there is a purpose, you know that there is someone who's playing. Talking about choices and decisions as a performer, I would like to ask like twofold question, which is in such dense patches, how do you find the balance between the voices, the balance between the sounds, and also the balance between sound and effects like reverb and delay?
Yeah, that's a very interesting and manifold question. The balance between the sounds is generated, first of all, by mixing them within the case. I'm using, as I showed, the QSC mixing system with sound effects and modulation of the VCAs and all of that. So there is always, when I'm performing, this conscious setup of CV volumes modulating amplitude and modulating amplitude developments in a way. And I'm also combining different sounds by themselves, so to speak. So I am not, if I'm working in this way, always combining all 4, 5, 6 voices I am capable of playing and I'm capable of patching together. But I deliberately choose different elements, which I then combine with each other to show off their interaction and to understand their interaction as well, because I'm obviously improvising, and then deciding on which to go next to, which to add, which to remove, to have a also time-based understanding of the elements in a way. This is also amplified by using delay and reverb, to get to the second part of the question, because they're time-based effects. So simple events are getting replicated in time or getting reinforced in time. But I also don't want to do that just to embellish the sound. I want to have these effects, these kinds of additional elements also be an integral part of the patch, which is why I'm using the Sarajevo delay in this system, which is a great bucket brigade delay, which I can modulate externally. I love using the Sapel for this, both when the Sapel is clocking the Usta regularly or the Sapel is just providing additional rhythmic elements to the patch, because time shifting and pitch shifting of the delay based on random modulation is great for evolving pitch sequences or tonal events without having them completely predictable all the time. The reverb, on the other hand, I sometimes patch as a gated reverb through the return channel of the QSC and group system modules. I sometimes filter the reverb with the Fumana maybe. So these effects in the send chain are also integrated with other elements of the patch. And on the other hand, I also try to compose and perform sounds which are able to stand up by themselves, so to speak. They can sustain themselves in their own quality, in their own right, without effects, because I want this kind of dynamic possibility to add and remove effects, to have even more textural flexibility and even more flexibility also in the time domain, both. So every time I patch, I experiment without and with delay. I sometimes just turn off the sends on the QSC just to combine sounds without delay with sounds that are sent into the delay, for example. And all these elements are integral to my improvisation and to my approach.
I see. So we can say that the complexity of the patch and the multitude of voices is not something that you that causes the composition, like a goal you have up front, but it's more of a result of the individual sounds characteristics and their interaction to one another. Am I right?
Yes, totally. I still struggle with really listening to patches, which is kind of interesting to me, because that's all I do mainly, because I try to listen to sound, react to sound, and find a new sound element or development of a sound that fits with the current situation for morphing sounds into different areas. But like this practice of really deep listening to simple sounds, it's not completely for me. I discovered, like, as you said, there are many people who are doing like this static drone music with modular synthesizers, tradition, Elian Radik and other people, all this kind of stuff. I find that completely fascinating and I love to listen to it, but it's hard for me not to interact.
I think that this calls in the problem of framing the sound, because sometimes I experience the same issue, but I found that it's harder to listen. For me, it happens when I don't have enough context on the sound, because some music is pretty much self-explanatory, so it provides you with the content and with the context at the same time, and that's easy to listen to. The more abstract the music gets, the more static, the more deep, the more focus it requires for you to listen to that. I think also the more context needs to provide to you. Where the best example is like John Cage's 433, where that piece is basically just context, where you frame up like 4.5 minutes of silence, and then you deep listen to that silence. But you have like the perfect frame, because you have a fixed time duration and an explanation on why you should listen to that kind of sound. And if you don't have such, I think that the reason why the more static music is harder to listen to is, to me, most of the time, is because it doesn't have enough context for you to focus on that.
Yeah. So for me, the reaction to that would be, for framing something during a performance, for framing elements, I try to rely on repetition in a way, but not on static repetition. Like also this element is also unstable in my performances. I realize that often during performances, I am not satisfied with having a completely repetitive element all the time. I want to tweak it. I want to change. I want to discover new stuff that develops from it. And the frame thus is always a frame of tension in a way. Like it's the tension of having a repetitive element, but also having the tension that it probably will change again. Like this is something I really love exploring, and I'm trying to lean positively into, because many times when I perform, people come up afterwards and say, yeah, it was very interesting, but you changed so much, you developed so much different stuff. And I agree, obviously, because that's what I do mostly. But at the same time, for me, it's all the same in a way. Because for me, the frame is the frame of discovery and the frame of tension all the time. But that's hard to actively deploy and actively set up beforehand, because you're doing it while you're performing. It's really in the act that you're doing this.
Yeah.
That you're changing up repetition, that you're changing up elements all the time.
I think I found a bit of this approach also in the track list of your latest release, Startling Cracks, because the pieces are very short. They have some common traits, like some common intention, let's say, but they sound quite different from one another. Is that somehow right?
Yeah, definitely. But on the other hand, I didn't want them to be like sketches or something. Like, obviously, that's also very en vogue for electronic music, to have like I like this sound. I'm recording it, and then I have another sound, and then I publish them as a collection of my sketches. That was also not my intention, because I wanted to still find a common trait in these recordings, as different as they are, that resembles my approach and my kind of experience when I'm performing them, when I am recording and developing them. And the track list is quite different as well from the titles, but the title of the whole EP, or the whole release, as you might call it, Startling Cracks, was something that resonated with me, and that I found that like maybe shows the approach I'm having the most. So like I'm always changing, I'm always developing something, but I'm also always startled a bit of I'm having a bit of anxiety about the next step I'm taking. And obviously there are also cracks in between the pieces and cracks in between the elements. I'm not aiming at a fragmentary aesthetic there, because I don't want to have the people think that I'm like devising a whole aesthetic for myself, which these pieces are fragments of. But like this approach of seeing something new, of experiencing something new, and experiencing like a rupture from that piece in opposition to the last one you listened to. To focus on these ruptures that come up while you're listening to the different tracks, listening them in context, but not within a frame.
I see. Which it's very similar to the composition technique you talked about, the patch we discussed in this video, where there is nothing like a predetermined structure, but the structure is more of a consequence of how the individual parts react to one another. The same track is the same thing is with these tracks that make sense, like as in opposition to each other.
Exactly. And my ideal track, or my ideal listening situation to such music, also for myself when I'm listening to other music pieces, is if you are experienced enough while listening to that, by which I'm not meaning educated enough, but if you're experienced enough, like when you listen to a lot of this kind of music, you start to, for me, it was and is always a revelatory experience. You start to listen about the possibilities that might arise in these pieces, but don't.
I see.
Like you're listening to the sounds, and you're listening to not only how they develop actually, but how they also might develop apart from that. Like you realize the materiality of sound, the possibilities of sounds are really endless, and they can go into different directions. And the composition of the whole release was also aiming at that, to like show, okay, these different kind of ruptures, these different kind of cracks between listening experiences can arise. And there are even more. There are way more in the future, and there are way more in this world, in the sounds around you, in the sounds that you're listening to in music, to listen to the space between notes, the spaces between melodies, melodic experiences, all these kind of elements.
That's a very fascinating concept, Lucas. So thank you for bringing this up. This is exactly the reason why we are doing those podcasts, this kind of podcasts, so to show how many different approaches one can have towards the same instruments. And I would like to link to an expression that you use that I liked a lot, which is the possibilities that may arise but don't. And to ask yourself, if you could choose the next Frap Tools modules that may arise but doesn't, what would it be?
I think I would love to see an effect module in any way, but an analog effect module, obviously, like a bucket brigade delay or like a phaser or like a frequency shifter, that is aiming into some parts of unpredictability. So that is that you can patch a bit more experimentally as you are able to do your current modules, because your current modules are very, very tightly knit together, which I love about the system, because you know how they work together. You immediately grasp on how they are constructed as a system. And obviously by patch programming them, you can also introduce a lot of unpredictability, especially with Zapel and internal feedback modulation of the Brenzo and all these kinds of elements. But I think an effects module that is a bit more rough, a bit more undecided in its sound maybe as well, would be amazing to counteract this and to expand it as well. I'm not searching for these kinds of modules actively, but I think it would be great to see how you would approach this kind of module design. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because Frap Tools is so meticulous about everything, and is so and also has this reputation, obviously, which is obviously kind of completely right in my opinion as well. But how do you approach something that is maybe not part of your philosophy, but integrated into your philosophy, or accentuate with your philosophy? You know what I mean? So I don't know how this module would turn out, but obviously that would be your job.
Yeah.
So that I would be curious to see. Yeah.
That's a very good point, because I agree with this topic, because sometimes we tend to be very concerned about the possibilities that, like, a module should, with the fact that a module should work flawlessly in every scenario. But I'm getting more interested in modules that shouldn't maybe work perfectly in every scenario, but sometimes they reach like a sort of critical point. And I think that we won't have anything like closely related to the effects module that you mentioned, but hopefully by Superbooth we will have something that goes in that direction, I would say.
I'm glad to hear, and I'm very curious.
So, Lukas, I think that we can cap it here for today. I will meet with the listeners again in Frap Tools studio, where I will try to create a patch in the style of Lukas Hermann by putting into practice all the very deep ideas that we shared today. And for now, I just thank you for being with us today. It has been a very lovely conversation.
Thank you too, and I'm really curious and excited to see what you're patching up.
Okay, so we are back in the Frap Tools studio, and this is the patch I came up with.
So to make this patch, I followed the three major characteristics of Lukas' patching style, namely using lots of voices, frequency modulation, and a balance between low, soothing tones and harsh feedbacks.
So I am using three voices: Brainsauce yellow oscillator, Brainsauce green oscillator, and Kunsa's filter number 4, frequency modulated by Falistri's green generator. Now let us break the patch into the details. I'm gonna remove the effects as well, which was just a light reverb. And this is our channel 1 of the mixer. As you can see, there is a very undulating motion that brings the signal in and out, like this. And this is actually two LFOs coming from the Usta sequencer. So we have a large slow oscillator on the main VCA, and another oscillator that morphs between filters 1 and 2 on the Kunsa by acting inversely on their respective VCAs, and both are processing the yellow oscillator from the Brainsauce. So let us hear filter number 1. That has this kind of low pass gate kind of vibe, and this is our filter number 2. That provides a more harsh and acid kind of sound. And the filter 1 is processing the pulse shaper out of Brainsauce yellow oscillator, and filter 2 is processing the Brainsauce red section, so the final output amplitude modulated with a static bandpass filter. And if I'm playing with the LFO, I'm actually shifting between the two. You can see that the first one is taking over right now. And I obtained that by programming on track 3 of the Usta sequencer, CV track, on track 4, sorry, where I had a sort of trapezoid LFO on channel CVA, and a similar but inverted trapezoid on the CVB channel. And the second sound on the Brainsauce is this one, which is also very slowly modulated by an LFO. Let's remove it and listen to it just by itself. It has this very high-pitched sound, and it is obtained by patching the green oscillator, which is frequency modulated, and the amplitude of the frequency modulation is modulated by another LFO. And so you can hear that the modulation goes in and out in a very subtle way. And the cutoff frequency is modulated by a fluctuating random voltage. And by bringing those signals in and out, I am able to add and subtract this sort of high-pitched, crisp kind of sound that goes in and out together with the first two filters. You can hear those very high-pitched sounds on our second channel that we can sum to the first filter. And then Our third voice is this one, very low in volume, and it is just a sine wave out of Kunsa's filter, and its amplitude is modulated by another LFO as well, still using the same technique on the Usta sequencer. And to obtain this kind of sweep, I am feeding a triangle wave out of Falistris into its cutoff frequency modulation, so to obtain a sort of exponential FM over a filter. And to modulate the modulation amount, I am controlling the bipolar output out of Falistri through one of the many LFOs that I have going on. So basically I have only two LFOs, but I am sending them through different points, as we can see. And I've been able to do that both by using the separate channels out of the Usta, which give me 4 CV tracks out of 2 tracks, tracks 3 and 4, but also the 333 where I am not able to obtain that. And I'm using another LFO over the CGM VCA to bring this modulation in and out as well. And finally, I am taking all the sounds going into the Kunsa, including the self-oscillating filter, and patching them into Fumana. It sounds like this. And I am using it just like Lukas to obtain a sort of rhythmic and percussive effect through the spectrum. So I'm using the unprocessed filter sound, the mixer, so mixed output going out of the Kunsa, and modulating it in many ways. The first one is by using a clock out of Sapel to pass to the modulation input, which is a technique that I am particularly fond of. And then I'm using a random voltage to emphasize the high spectrum through the tilt parameter, and another random voltage that I am generating on the Usta this time to modulate the parametric scanner central frequency. And it sounds like this. And so, by combining everything together, like this, I am able to create some layers thanks to the many LFOs going in and out. I have a very gentle delay and reverb that I can add on top of everything, especially the modulating tracks, like this. And I have many options, including high-pass filters instead of band-pass filters, like this, to have more sharp and acid kind of sounds. And the sequence is playing on track 1. It is a very simple sequence with 2 stages that randomize their pitch. And I have the N+1 output that modulates the frequency of the green oscillator, thus obtaining different behavior every time. The Usta is clocked by Sapel, and the clock itself is modulated by one of the 2 LFOs that Usta is generating, because I set the tracks 3 and 4 to work with an internal tempo, respectively of 87 and 80 BPM, while tracks 1 and 2 work with the external clock, which is a fluctuating Sapel clock. So I'm basically using Usta as 2 separate sequencers. And so I have been able to obtain a complex layer by just using an advanced modulation routing with only basically 3 sound sources. So I would like to thank Lukas for staying with us and for the inspiring conversation. My name is Giovanni Grandi. This is Let's Talk Music with Frap Tools, which is available on the major podcast platform and on YouTube as well. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time.